Y'all, it's too much. I'm on the online public piano forums kind of often, and there's a couple of questions that I overwhelmingly see. One is people coming to those forums and saying, how do I get started learning music? And the overwhelming reply is, well, you got to learn to read your notes. And then the other group of questions that come in is, how do I learn to read notes? To which the teachers say, you learn to read by doing it every day, which is such a cop-out response. I don't want to get too much into that, but it's a nothing response. So many piano students do not learn to read music. Even though their teachers talk about how important it is, there's no correlation between how important your teacher says music reading is and students actually learning to read music. And it's very frustrating to me that that becomes such a goal. Listen, the only reason to read music is to hear music. Let me say that again. The only reason to read music is to hear music. Either physical sound waves moving your eardrums or reading and hearing it in your mind, if you can do that. But this absurd situation has arisen where people want to read music who aren't already playing music. Think about the way you learn language. You're using your language creatively in conversation long before you're reading it. So I just want to propose a different approach. What if you never learn to read music? Does that leave you feeling sad and discouraged that you can't be a musician? It shouldn't. So many musicians who make complex, interesting music or simple music that they just like do it without reading music. Music is fundamentally a creative and expressive art. Pretending that you need to read notes that someone else composed in order to learn how to music is not correct. Reading music is a useful skill. That's all it is. It's not a fundamental skill. I just had to speak up about this because I see people asking about how to learn to read music every day, multiple people, and it's the wrong question. Yet the people functioning as teachers in the replies egg them on and encourage them to the wrong thing. The reading music cannot come before the making music. Making music is the primary goal. Trying to learn to read music is a losing proposition for 98% of the population. There's a few people with very high music aptitudes for whom reading will click very easily. At the same time, there's a few people with very low aptitudes for whom reading will never click. But that does not mean that those people should not learn music. As a matter of fact, music teachers should be very conscientious about how to address the entire population, not just the 2% that reading is going to come to easily. As a matter of fact, if we're teaching to those 2% of very high aptitude students, what does that say about us as teachers? Those are the easy students. If I'm proud of my skill as a teacher, well, let me teach. Let me teach everyone. I get a blast out of teaching average aptitude, low aptitude, and high aptitude students too. But not because we're focused on learning how to read music first, because we're not. We focus on making music first. What are you reading when you read music? You're reading rhythm patterns and tonal patterns combined. But if you don't know what a rhythm pattern is, and if you're not creating with rhythm patterns, trying to learn to read them is a losing battle. Same with tonal patterns. If you don't know what a tonal pattern is, trying to learn to read is a losing battle. Because just reading the names of the notes on the staff ain't it. Just thinking that a quarter note is one beat ain't it. That's not music. Rhythm patterns are music. tonal patterns are music. Creating music with rhythm patterns and tonal patterns paves the way for learning to read music. Trying to learn to read music first inhibits learning how to create with musical patterns. It's a real failure of imagination of music teachers to not know what to do with students other than show them what middle C looks like on the staff. So if you're a music teacher, I dare you to make music with your students. Be creative with musical patterns. Do that, reading can follow. And if you're a music student who has tried to learn to read music and failed, does that make you a failure at music? No, it does not. I see all this talk about reading. Oh, shoot. Excuse me. I see all this talk about reading music on the forums. I see nothing about rhythm patterns and tonal patterns. These are the fabric of music. Why are we not teaching those things? Anyway, so the question I ask is, what if you never learn to read music? Because I hope if you can put that aside, then you'll find that you can actually create music, which is a powerful form of expression. I just don't want to see you stuck, haltingly playing through stuff with no flow. It happens all the time. And then giving up after a couple of years because it just doesn't click. Well, it's not because you're not musical. It's because the learning is out of order. I would say it's a blind leading the blind kind of situation with teachers telling students to read and students saying, how do I read? But it's much worse than that because unsighted people can make incredible music. Not from reading, usually. I think there is a Braille version of music notation, but I think by and large, unsighted people are using their ears. Your most important sense as a musician. Let reading wait. With my young students, some of them from a very early age are all about, when am I going to learn to read music? When am I going to learn to read music? The best thing I can do as a teacher is pace them and hold off on that for a few years while they learn to create with patterns. When I do that, when the time is right, they will learn to read and they'll do it easily. It won't be tedious because when they learn what the patterns look like in notation that they've been using in improvisation for years, it's instantly recognizable. On the other hand, trying to explain what a series of quarter notes and dotted eighth notes and 16th notes, some of them with beams and flags, upbeats, rests, trying to explain what those things mean and how those things turn into musical sounds, it is impossible. And it's so odd to me because music education has been on this reading kick for, my entire life, 50 years. But it's just so painfully clear to me that putting reading first doesn't work. Why is it that all teachers don't recognize that? So teachers are kicking themselves trying to get students to learn to read and feeling confused and bad when it doesn't work, feeling like they're not good teachers. Students are getting tired of lessons because it's painful to sit on that bench and try to decipher this kind of stuff without having the musical vocabulary to make sense of it. It's painful. So they quit after a year or two. But they learn to value that above all else, which is why they come back as older learners saying, how do I learn to read? Because that's the only thing they think learning music is. So, if you're learning to read music, more power to you. It's a useful skill. If you're using it to make beautiful musical sounds, great. If it's tedious, then stop it. You don't have to do that. So again, I wish every teacher was talking about tonal patterns and rhythm patterns the stuff of music. They're not. I have a piano course that uses tonal patterns. It's called the Genesis course. I'll put a link to it in the description. So it's based on learning to play by ear and learning to improvise according to different chord functions in major and minor tonalities. So if you think there's no way to learn music apart from learning to read it, please take my course, because it's so possible. In fact, it works much better than trying to learn to read. Learning to read can wait. Learning to hear and understand is the essence of music. Don't let that wait. Do that today.